Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen Workshop. Would you all rise and pledge allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Okay, first item, review and act on a request to reconsider the board's decision on June 18, 2018 to prohibit parking on the northerly side of Wall Street between Mechanic and Lloyd Dyer Drive.
Mr. Chairman, I will so move and let the administrator explain.
Mr.
If there's a
Administrator,
second.
give me a second.
Second.
I have a
Yep.
second. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, so the board voted on June 18th to implement no parking along the northerly side of Wall Street, and then and that was one of three recommended solutions to a problem that the town, in fact, has created at 62 Wall Street across the street, where at some point in the past, you'll recall, the town paved over a portion of the property owner's land and we've been using that land as part of the roadway, encroaching on their land. Since that time, there's been as you know, a resident has complained, he's here today, about that decision and that it adversely impacts his ability to rent to tenants in the building at 61 Wall Street. So I spoke with Mr. Tyler today, the former Utilities and Facilities Superintendent, about this matter again. And because the Cherry Wall Lloyd Dyer roadway segment, is scheduled for design work on a two-phase schedule, design fiscal 19, full construction fiscal 20, I'd like to recommend that the board tonight rescind that vote from June 18th, and then have the solution to this particular problem incorporated into the design that's going to be happening later this year anyway. So that's what I would suggest. That's my suggestion to the board this evening.
Okay, do I have any questions from the board?
No, I think it makes perfect sense. Rather than us do something and then the engineers come in and
Redesign something different?
redo the whole thing, I'd rather hold off and wait and see. The only thing I'm going to mention is, I don't know what the cost would be, but I mentioned to Mr. Gregory a few days ago that maybe a bollard put right where the cars turn in and out of the parking lot for Lloyd Dyer Drive, okay, to prevent cars and trucks from hitting the roof, or for a truck coming, going towards Cherry Street, hitting the roof of the building, as has happened in the past on several occasions. I don't know. Do you have any idea what that would cost, Mr. Gregory?
I don't know off the top of my head. It's certainly something to consider, and I think the goal here will be to step back, have the Bayside engineering survey that we commissioned, give that to the designer for the new roadway improvement project, have them review it, and then we can get into those details.
Okay.
I think, and that's one detail, Ralph, I think is worth looking at.
Okay.
So,
But I want to also
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I wanted to also say, if the board does rescind the vote tonight, I want to make clear that it doesn't commit the town to anything, nor does it promise anything to any residents. I want to make that clear. It's simply, if the board so chooses, it's simply a vote to rescind its previous vote, and then to let the design work that's already scheduled for this roadway improvement happen and incorporate into it the particular issues with this problem.
okay,
So,
Yep.
go ahead.
Yeah, in regards to what Ralph was saying about a bollard, I had mentioned that to Steve. He was concerned about an object, solid object.
being in the.
being kind of on the edge of the road where it's going to damage cars and vehicles. They did put
Better than the building.
they put a flexible, like a stanchion there, with that's reflective. So I think that's going to help. But we'll see.
Do we know through the chair, do we know, Warren, who put that up?
The town did.
The town did.
Yeah.
Can I suggest that the town invest in something a little more solid than duct tape to hold the sign up? Because that's being held by duct tape.
Well, the one in the ground is
So
actually
that's in
drilled.
the ground, but
That's in the ground.
there's a sign on the ground. And it's wrapped with duct tape. I don't know if anybody else has seen it.
Well, I
but I've
haven't
seen it.
No, yeah.
Wrapped in duct tape. I think it needs to be made more permanent. We're talking 2 years here before the reconstruction is done. And duct tape is great, but it's subjected to all kinds of weather, and sooner or later, it's gonna,
Would you reach out to
Fail.
Evan and just run that by him, please?
Sure. And the police also.
And, right, and make sure that any obstruction we put in the roadway has to go before the police anyways. So maybe between Chief Darren and Evan, they can figure that out. So it looks like the design work's gonna be fiscal 2019. Construction's scheduled for 2020?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, and I would add, Mr. Chairman, that the design process will include the full public hearing, opportunities for folks to come in, give their input, which will be good.
And that's normally what happens, just so you know, so you can follow up, so,
You're gonna get the new leader.
right.
Yes,
Any
learned my lesson.
further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, it just makes sense. We've been doing this. It doesn't make sense to make a major change like that before design of that area is complete. So I think a holistic approach to this and getting the public involved is the best way to
I
do it.
agree. So be it. So I entertain that motion to,
I made the motion, sir. We can vote on it. It was seconded by Mrs. Berthium.
okay, all those in favor of rescinding the vote from June 18th?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Okay, so we're back to square one today.
So I should say nothing at this point?
You don't have to. If you want to say something, you can.
I did prepare a statement if you be so kind to let me,
Not a problem. I'll give you,
thank you so much. Yeah,
You want to come up and use the mic? People at home can hear you better.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
As you know, my name is Stephen Hassey. I own the building at
Yes, ma'am.
61 Wall Street. And I truly thank you for rescinding the decision, and I welcome the opportunity to address you tonight. I know by now that you all are very familiar with this issue, so I will be brief. There are several proponents willing to speak for saving those 9 to 10 parking spaces. For brevity's sake, it would make sense where the boards to hear where you people stand, which I also know right now. There are many statements, charts, and tables in the study that indicate that making that section of Wall Street a one-way will work well. And I quote on page 14, "The change resulting from implementing the short one-way has very little impact on the level of service of the nearby intersections." The study also finds the estimated distance is only 270 feet. In addition, in the study, 77.3% of the traffic already goes in the westerly direction, and 85% of the traffic goes 20 miles an hour or less. The slow speeds, the short distance, and the straight road make for an ideal situation for emergency vehicles. In the study, traffic flow is addressed on page 10, and I quote, "Traffic operates very well with no queuing at any of the intersections. The level of service is better than acceptable both during the morning and evening peak hours. In addition, the one-way works well for trucks. Trucks heading west to the Spencer Housing Authority driveway turn left to enter and left to exit, making for an easier turn, especially with the utility pole right next to the driveway. I would estimate the depot building roof has been hit 4 to 5 times in the 24 years I've owned the building. Only trucks, usually rental trucks with inexperienced drivers, heading eastbound have hit the building in those years since I've owned the building. The owners of the depot building support the one-way, even though it is not the very best solution for them. They want what is best for all. what I did here is I also showed a chart on the last page, and I drove the distance of what this one-way would entail. And I drove both ways from the lights on West Main Street, taking the right on Wall Street and heading down to the depot, the Southbridge Housing Authority driveway, and that took 36 seconds. And I drove it the other way, heading down and taking a right on Mechanic, and then taking another right on Wall Street, and if we were one way, and driving into the Southbridge Housing Authority, and that took 47 seconds. It actually increased the distance by 14 seconds. The other thing I'd like to make a point, over the years, I've owned this building for 24 years, I've said, in each and every one, I get questionnaires from the planning board. And every time I get a questionnaire, I've always put, I think a one-way would help avoid, reduce the congestion in the area and cause the traffic to flow safely and would avoid any trucks from ever hitting that building again. No eastbound truck has ever hit that building, and it's never been a problem. If you're in there during the day, you'll see tractor-trailer trucks constantly taking the right turn at the end of Mechanic onto Wall, and they've had no problem negotiating that right turn heading in the westbound direction. So it's really worked. I've been down there. I do all the maintenance on my house myself. I've been there. I've seen the traffic. I've actually witnessed, heard the crashes on 2 of the impacts in those years. It's always been, and the 2 times I was there, it was rental U-Haul trucks that hit the building. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for letting me address you tonight. Thank you for your
Hey,
decision.
save your materials, if you'll want to talk again when the time's appropriate.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is action item to appoint a CMRPC delegate and alternate for fiscal 2019. So I know you talked to Steve, right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I spoke with Steve Tyler, who wishes to be the board's, wishes to continue to be the board's delegate. And then Warren currently is the alternate.
That would be my second choice.
Is the new,
You can't, you have to be a resident.
oh, he can't.
So that's right. So the new superintendent lives out of town, so he wouldn't be able to.
You actually have to live in the community, Mr.?
You have to live in, yeah, you have to live in the town.
Okay.
So,
No,
So,
I'm okay with that, I
so
guess.
I would
Given
entertain,
that rule. Yeah. Thanks, Steve, for volunteering.
yeah.
and he did ask me prior to leaving if that was possible, if he'd stay on, and I told him to talk to you on it.
Yeah.
So, that being said, I'd entertain those motions.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded.
I have a motion and a second to name Steve as a delegate and Mr. Monette as the alternate. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Keep going the way you're going, Warren.
Yeah.
Next action item, appoint Stan Weinberg as the town council, who is currently our town council.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Weinberg is currently the town's council, and I'd like to recommend to the board that you vote to extend his term through fiscal 19.
Through the chair. When I spoke to him at the last town meeting,
Thought he was done.
I thought he was scaling back. And he said there was certain types of litigation he had no interest in doing anymore. So that concerns me, because we have some rough litigation that
Right.
occurs.
Right. So he has expressed the same to me. And as you all know, we have had quite an uptick in litigation during the past several months that's been farmed out to another firm. So I think it's not the ideal situation. So at some point, I'd like to have the conversation about, how do we get from where we are now to an attorney or a firm that can handle all of the town's legal needs. But out of respect to Mr. Weinberg, I'd like to let him finish the year.
Yep.
And then, I'd like to have those conversations mid-year, January or so, to figure out what will work for going forward.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. I'd like him to finish the year too. I think mid-January, I was thinking a little earlier, but maybe early January, right after the new year. I'll discuss it with him. I like Stan. He's been town council here for more years than I can count. He's been in and out a couple of times and was good enough to come back when he was not renewed 1 year because the board went with a more a larger firm. I think I agree with what was said down here with, I think it was Tony, that, you know, it'd be nice to have one firm to go to for all of your problems in plain English. Kind of like going to a medical practice that, you know, has every conceivable type of doctor in it you can have versus going to the family practitioner that's all by him or herself. And those are certainly nice, but today you'll notice they're few and far between. And I think the same thing is true with law. There are a number of firms that I've worked with as a superintendent of schools and as a selectman when I was here in the 90s, in the previous century, when I was on the board in the previous century. How's that? That, you know, virtually have any type of lawyer that you need. They have specialists in every single area, and we've had to go out and we've had to hire a couple of firms just in the past 2.5 years I got back on the board. And so I think it makes sense to do that, maybe ease him out. If there's some little thing he can do for us after, fine. If there isn't, he served us well. But I think it's time to at least look at other firms. And he could reapply also and present himself. I would not ban him from doing that. But I know what's out there, and there's a lot to look at, and it's kind of like buying a car. You know, there's not just one kind of car out there. So I would go along with that. Do you need a motion
And
beyond what we did, or?
just a quick follow-up, I'm in agreement with what both Ralph and Tony says, but I think some of the litigation right now, he is definitely handling the housing.
I'm sorry?
For the housing, he's
Yes.
definitely deep in that, and we know that's pretty much ahead of us, so I'm in favor of, I think you're right, come January, we gotta take a look at it. I think you need to know where he's coming from.
Yeah, and I haven't had that conversation yet with him, so.
And he's made mention to it, so.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he'll get a second win.
Right.
You
We don't
talk to
know.
him.
Right.
Who knows? But
One thing I would add that's related to this discussion, Mr. Chairman, is I'm going to need to make a request for this special town meeting to increase the line item for town council this year by a
Substantial.
rather substantial amount. So just that's
Which
coming.
I know the board is very familiar with, I'm sure by now, so.
you make it any darker, Mr. Administrator.
I don't mean to be doom and gloom right now, but
No.
Reality.
It's reality.
It's
Reality.
No, Mr. Chairman, I understand why he needs the money. We're in litigation. Litigation is to protect citizens in Spencer. I think it's very important that we follow through on litigation. Very important that we not scrimp on attorney fees on that.
I agree.
Because all I'm going to say is that citizens are at risk if we don't do our job with due diligence. So I have no problem with that.
So you want to move that we appoint him
I'll
and,
move to, do we have a motion or not?
No.
I'll move to appoint Stan Weinberg through June 30th, 2019. And that in early January, the administrator will have a conversation with him, with Mr. Weinberg. And I would also suggest that at that point, and you ought to have a conversation with him before then, because he's going to hear about this.
right,
You know, we put an advertisement out there and see what's out there. I've seen this done with school districts. Sometimes they stay with who they've got. Other times, they change counsel. But I think we need to look at resumes, we need to look at law offices' prospectus. I know I worked with two large firms as a superintendent, both here in Spencer East Brookfield and in Ashburnham, Westminster. And it's whenever you had a problem, if the lead counsel couldn't handle it, he or she could tell you who in their office could handle it. And they're people who 9 times out of 10 have extensive litigation experience in the area of law in which you are pursuing. So with that, that's my motion.
Okay, so I need a second on the motion to appoint Stan Weinberg through June 30th, 2019, with discussion to be taken up beginning of January on where we stand with council.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, my comments were not to, I think Stan has served us
We know that.
very well. So it's just what he's communicated to us, we've got to follow up on it. That's all.
I agree. Okay, next item, review and act on the dissolution of the Landfill Solar Development Committee. Mr. Administrator.
So, Mr. Chairman, this committee was formed before I arrived to get this project off the ground, up and running. As you all know, we're there. The project is making its way through permitting. I'll tell you that we just received notice today from DEP on the post-closure use permit application. It's another hurdle. As you know, there's been a number of hurdles that we've had to cross. So my recommendation is that this committee there's no longer a role for this committee to play. So I'd like to recommend that the board dissolve the Landfill Solar Development Committee.
Agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question to the administrator. Mr. Gregory, when it goes in a construction phase, all right, who is going to be the town's eyes and ears?
Well, I think that's going to be a joint effort with the new superintendent, with myself, with Otis. There'll be many eyes on this construction project.
My concern, and obviously you had little or nothing to do with the solar projects that are in place in town. And I'm not dissing any one individual here, all right? I don't find that acceptable. I think you people should have massive input. I think what's happened with a couple of these solar projects, that quite frankly, the town has fallen asleep at the switch. I think there needs to be a point person or a committee, where this is gonna be on town property, a committee, just like a building committee, that supervises what is being done, with weekly meetings with the contractor and anybody else that's involved in it. When I was chairman of the building committee that built Knox Trail School, every week we had meetings with the architect and the contractor over 2 years. I myself, as chair, visited the site on the weekend every week. All right? Outside at first, when the building was buttoned up, I had a key. I would go into that building alone by myself, much to my wife's chagrin. All right? And I would go through the building and see what was being done. And I would sometimes not have a problem in the world. Other times I would come back and have questions that could be answered. So I'm not sure, and I don't mean to blindside you, Tom, I'm not sure we should dissolve this committee. I'm thinking this committee should act as a building committee and have some responsibility together with all the people you mentioned, and certainly yourself included, to make sure that all the i's are dotted and all the t's are crossed. I mean, I've observed the hellacious problems up on Home Street for the past several months and what those citizens have gone through. Obviously, someone in town wasn't looking. They were connected to National Grid and did not have to did not have to pass any other test to get going and doing what they want to do, which is making money. And I understand and respect that that's what their role is, all right? They never should have been connected to National Grid until everybody else, all those folks you talked about, sign on the dotted line that everything is done. And because that wasn't done, the neighbors up there have had muck and water going into their yards that is totally unnecessary. Also, the last time I went up there a few weeks ago, the retention pond still was being protected from children and animals wandering in there by a yellow police type tape. So I think permanent fence should be in there. I think there needs to be eyes on this beyond the folks that you said, because it's almost like, you know, the soldiers are going in 10 directions at once. I don't know how anybody else feels about it, but if it's not this committee, I think it should either be another committee, or one person is gonna wear it. And that one, maybe it's not fair for one person to wear it. I'm thinking a committee might be better. I don't know what your thoughts are, folks.
Through the chair.
Sir.
I think this committee was set up to get the ball rolling, the development committee.
Yep,
So I think, I'm not against what you're saying, that there should be some oversight, and there should be a lot of oversight. And not just because it's a town facility. It should be on every one of these solar, you know.
right.
They ought to be, you know.
We gotta do that in the
inspected.
bylaw.
But I think this committee wasn't set up to do that, for the oversight. So I think some of the people that are on there might have, you know, signed up for something, it's okay, it's done now.
They wanna walk away.
Yeah, so you know, without asking them, or I know Gary was involved with that.
So just to kind of give you a little hindsight on it, the makeup of this committee started with facilities and utilities superintendent was on it, town planner is on it, I was on it. So it was the makeup of the departments that have to oversee this to begin with. That's why we tackled it the way we did. So either way, I mean, it's the key players for the most part, whether you made a new committee or not, the players would have to be what was on that committee. Some of the same names, just so everybody's aware. It included Chief Parsons, who was an integral part of that.
Yep.
So just to clarify, the key players we're talking about are the key players that served on this committee. The overlook, just to follow up, Ralph, on your question, how could Home Street get set up? And how did Mechanic Street get set up and hooked up without anybody knowing? Is the procedure is this: they submit their paperwork to National Grid. They don't know when National Grid is going to hook them up. It's a here we are, we're hooking up. That's what happened with Moschini's. That's what happened with Home Street. If they do not, and again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, if they do not get hooked up at that point, they go to the bottom of the list. That could sit there for the next 2 years without being hooked up, which would have an adverse effect, my opinion, on whether you generate new revenue coming into the town. I did happen to go to Home Street last week when they were working there. They changed the grades. You might understand. Now it directs the water into it instead of being the square holes. I actually walked the perimeter because it was talk that there's a bunch of trash strewn up there. There is not. It's an old squatters. It's on the farm down the road. There was one bag of trash. They did remove that for me. They have contacted the fire chief because he had conversation. They are posting a 24-hour-a-day number, which they have to. That's part of the bylaw. And the chief is signing off, and there always has been a Knox box on that, just so everybody knows. So I did follow up. So that's how they got hooked up, just so everybody understands. That's how Mechanic Street got hooked up. That's how these solar farms are getting connected without us knowing, because National Grid doesn't call us and say, listen, we're hooking up today. They don't even call the vendor. They show up and say, listen, we're hooking now. So that's how it works. I don't know how you bypass that. I don't know how you control National Grid when it comes to that. I don't know what the procedure would be, and I don't really know that we really have an authority, but I don't know, you might know.
Through the chair, the town has right now requirements of a bond, like for a new driveway, somebody's building a new house, you have to have a bond. So when we go in, I have to take a bond out to do the driveway. And unfortunately, the town has it for 5 years, which they don't have a 5-year bond. They either have a 2-year or a 3-year bond. So that should be that's for another day. But we could do a bond, a requirement on the solar fields that the committee that you just mentioned, everybody has to sign off, even if they're connected, or that bond, whatever it might be. You know, it's $2,000 for a driveway. It might be a $5,000 or a $10,000. I don't know. I don't know what the magic number is, but come up with a bond that they have to pull. And until the town is satisfied, the neighbors are satisfied, like on Home Street, where damage has been to other people's property. Until that's been solved, and then everybody signs off on that bond, and then they're good to go. I don't know, what do you think? Mr.
That's an interesting suggestion. I was thinking, as I'm listening to the discussion, it's not, the concern isn't so much around the construction, because that's relatively cut and dry. These are ballasted arrays that are placed in rows, row after row,
Yep.
et cetera. The concern is the closeout and whether it's done properly and that things don't get missed. I think that's the heart of the issue, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It's also the engineering. The engineering on Home Street wasn't addressed properly. And, you know, the asphalt should have gone clear up to the top of the hill. More riprap should have been installed, more redirection of water. So there was some,
Right.
there was
Now, that was
some
Holmes'
engineering
particular,
problems.
a particular one, because there was a subdivision originally planned for that land, right? So we have a little bit of that's a that's
It was a
an outlier to
change of use.
change of use.
At that point.
So what I'd like to suggest is, and I have a very good rapport with Emily from Citizens Energy. I've been working with her since the first day I arrived here, having routine conversations with her, involved in all the negotiations. I think she would be more than okay with, weekly meetings with the new superintendent and myself and Eben. They don't have to be long, but they can be weekly meetings every Friday morning or what have you, to check in on, is this being done? Have you considered, and I'm happy to do that. And I think she'd agree to that.
Well,
So
they're one of the best. I mean, I think as far as working, very versed in landfill, solar. So
it's a
I
big
think-
company.
But I think, get back to what both Warren and Ralph are talking about, I think that's critical, that our key players, which are, we have to worry about still the transfer station portion of it.
Right.
And what effect it could have there, which your utility and facilities follows into place. And I really think Paul has to be a part of that.
That's
Because
fine.
that's
Yeah.
the other critical piece to this.
But yeah, I mean, whoever the team is,
I don't have a problem. I guess my biggest point is, and to back up what both Warren and Ralph are talking about, is we need to make sure that checks and balances are held to, and make sure we don't miss anything. And not just because it's the town solar farm, but I think as these keep coming forward, I have wind that there's a lot more trying to get pushed through the process that, hopefully when Ralph and that crew gets on, we can fine tune our bylaw. So meanwhile, what we have is what we have. So I think
Right.
we need checks and balances. So I don't have a problem with that.
At this point, and this is not my wheelhouse, but at this point of the project, your bonding suggestion is very interesting. That's the ultimate protection for,
Which is what I'm
For
hoping
the
gets in
town.
the next.
yeah, so I don't know if it's
That
too late in the
makes
game
sense.
to introduce that, or, I don't know how this is
It
done.
might be. I don't know.
It would be part of the bylaw, would it not?
I'd have to research that.
Yeah,
Let me-
so it's a done deal
You
on this
could find
project.
out.
Probably, yeah.
I would bet it is,
Yeah.
but it's worth asking the question. I don't think
And I
it
will.
hurts.
I think that should be a requirement on
Well,
any,
if we do it for a driveway, why wouldn't we do it for?
We do it for, if I put a hole in the road for a water line or a gas line, I'm responsible for that hole for 5 years.
yeah.
A hole in the road. These people are affecting neighborhoods.
I can tell you that
It should be for at least 3 years, because, if there's a design flaw, which obviously we know there have been, they can be addressed. And these people, I think, have been trying to address them, but it's for that company that says, we're done. At least
Oh,
you
we've
have
seen
the
that
protection.
before.
Yeah, we have. It's just one of the schools. But at least we have the
I
protection.
would follow up with that, though. That's a perfect question.
I will follow up with that, Mr. Chairman, and I would just also add that there's the lease and the pilot agreement, especially the lease, has strict language about non-performance. So Citizens is being held to the same standards that any other solar developer is being held to through Otis, Planning Board oversight, and Building Inspector oversight. And also, we have a particular new element with a lease here involved. So there's language in there that protects the town for non-compliance, non-performance. But I'll look into the
And I
issue
must
of the
say,
bond.
it's not just those departments, but DEP is right on top of it.
Oh, without question.
So,
That goes without saying.
but I would say definitely,
Well, I'll rescind my motion, and I would ask that maybe on our next meeting, we have a broader discussion on this.
Yeah, and through the chair, I agree, Ralph. I mean, that bond issue, I wouldn't worry about who else is doing it.
I like that
Let's
idea.
do it. That's self
Amen.
protection for the
find out what
town.
it takes to put it in
Yes,
place.
yeah.
I agree.
I think it's just like any other construction. I mean, that the town,
I'll move to dissolve the landfill solar development committee.
So I have a motion, do I have a second?
second.
Have a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Act on proposed dog park for Luther Hill Park, Mr. Administrator. It's just us here, so.
So, on August 6th, the Parks and Recreation Commission voted to not move forward on the proposed dog park at Luther Hill Park. This action here tonight for the Board of Selectmen is to essentially close the loop on that, so that there's no longer any question about where the town wishes to go.
Mr. Chair, may I make a motion to close discussion on proposed dog park and support the vote taken by the Parks and Recreation Committee to not move forward at this time?
Okay, I have a motion. I have a second. Any further discussion?
I would just say that if this group has another option besides Luther Hill Park, for one member, I would be willing to listen to them.
Sure.
But I think the 99-year provision, together with the location, is what sunk it. If there's another location, I'm willing to entertain it, but that 99-year sign on the dotted line, we're gonna keep you open and running for 99 years, without a cost study being done, a unbiased cost study, seeing how much a year it's going to cost, would be foolhardy on our parts. We just reopened Luther Hill Public Park for swimming, for people. It had been closed for the past, 4 seasons, I think. And instituted the swimming lessons back in town. If we get another crunch like we had before I got on the board, you could be in a position of having to keep the dog park open and close Luther Hill Park again for the purpose for which it was designed and given, which is for public swimming and recreation. So maybe there's a way around that, I don't know. Maybe a private foundation, or if someone does an unbiased study and comes back and tells us the cost is minimal, fine, but I'm not sure what the cost would be. I've heard different stories. I've heard that there have to be people to check where you live and whatnot. I also heard that some of the dog parks, anybody can walk in that wants to, whether they live in the town or not. There's very little supervision. But either way, there's gonna be some cost containment, there has to be repairs made. There are bound to be some dog owners that don't take care of their responsibility in terms of what the dog may do there, if you get my drift. And that's going to have a cost attached to it. So that's all I have to say on that.
Okay. Sir,
There's some nice land down at Cranberry, at the park, Howell Park.
yeah.
Right there on the corner, there's a beautiful field. Minimal excavation, minimal work.
Oh, yeah.
Actually get it up and get the state involved so they have a little skin in the game. And if the people wanted to go that route, I agree with Ralph. I think that's a great spot for it, but not have the town on the hook for it, But
Yeah.
Agreed. Okay.
You might also, Mr. Chairman, have a dog owner in town that has land that he or she might be willing to donate. I mean, that hasn't been raised before. There are other options, I think, that could be explored. There may be another piece of town land that I can't think of that might be able to be used, that would be far less impactful than Luther Hill Public Park. But the 99-year commitment is the thing that scares me. I've seen what's happened before when we've hit rough times. This town hall is only open 3.5 days a week, and up until last year, it was only open 3 days a week. This is a town of nearly 12,000 people. That is utterly ridiculous. It's not open in the evening. We did restore half a day last year. The library has seen decreased hours and cuts in employees. There's things we need to do for the police department, the highway department, positions that need to be reinstated. I could go on, things that impact the quality of life of all of the citizens of Spencer versus just those who own dogs who want to go to a dog park. That's a very small percentage of our population. It's an important part of our population, and I'm not saying, this should go off the table completely if there's another proposal that is put together a little bit better, I guess, is what I'm saying. I mean, no disrespect to anybody involved in the dog park process. Now, I wish it could happen, but not yet, not until we have covered a lot of those other bases I mentioned.
Okay. So I have a motion, a second.
You do?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next one, review and introduce a draft policy for the Meritorious Service Award. So you all had copies of that?
Yes, thank you.
So this has been ongoing for quite a while, and we've missed a few. So we're hoping that, well, we're gonna introduce it tonight, we're not gonna vote on it, but at least, Mr. Administrator, I'll let you take it from there, for our discussion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so Brenda drafted both of these documents for the board's review. So that's really where we are. So I, of course, don't really have a good history for this because I'm new to town. So I rely on the board's discretion to determine which, what language works best. And
Mr. Chairman?
Sir.
Let me ask a question. Why is it a 4/5 supermajority on the leadership hall? I have concerns about that because we're talking people who oftentimes have passed, have died.
the thinking here was, as I understand it, that the Meritorious Service Award is more frequent than the Leadership Hall Award, which is reserved for maybe a more elevated position, for lack of a better word. So the thinking was, and this was just to put in here for your consideration,
Yeah, I know.
to make the vote more than just a majority, but that can be.
Through the chair, I agree with the supermajority. I would have suggested a unanimous vote. This was not meant to be, I get concerned of this being a political pot of you-know-what when it comes up, and that's why we may have violated rules.
You-
That's why we had ballot votes, so that no one would think that way. I agree with this, at least a supermajority. It should be kind of a feel-good, unifying type of, instead of a split vote or a. And I think what's not here is also the work that has to be done ahead of time.
Right.
They should be submitted by somebody. The name should be submitted. They're back. Maybe it's here, but there should be a form. The name should be submitted. The reason why they're submitting the name.
Go ahead, Brenda.
Oh,
Sorry.
There is a form, I think.
That, so on the meritorious, we do it that way, but for the leadership hall in the past, the board is the one that's come up with the name. So
Right.
if you want to change that to have a.
Well, I mean, we've
Different
come up with the names, but it's a very small population of people, so if we want to get a wider selection of candidates, we should have those submitted from the public as well as if someone here has an opinion, they should do the same thing. I also think, to me, leadership hall is a very important. The meritorious is too, but I mean it's sort of like this town's Hall of Honor.
Right.
And it should be a very, something that takes a, you know, thought and,
I mean, I'm in
and a
agreement with
process.
that. I think that's.
Even to the point where
purpose of it.
there should be signatures with that submission. It couldn't be someone's favorite politician.
Right.
There should be a reason for it, and maybe some background, you know, backing signatures or something. I don't know.
I'm okay now with the supermajority, now that you explained it, Tony. I'm okay with that. I really don't know about taking nominations from outside.
Okay,
That could be very politicized.
you're right.
I'm in office, and I think this honor would help me to get reelected next year when I have a tough opponent or something. So I asked for my political supporters to get a petition ready and come before the board. I think this board, we're a pretty varied board. I mean, we don't all live on the same street. We have different backgrounds that we come from and work and whatnot. We run in some circles, same circles, but we run in a lot of different circles, if you know what I mean. I think we as a group know who would deserve to be somebody with materials, I can't even say it now. Help me out here.
Leadership material.
Be in the leadership hall, be in the leadership hall, okay? And you're not, you know, it's gonna be somebody who's given a lot to the town. Not somebody that got elected to an office 3 years ago. We're not gonna vote for somebody like that, or even 6 years. It's gotta be somebody who dedicated a significant portion of their lifetime to the town of Spencer.
Yep.
Either in a volunteer way, or as an employee of the town, or it's, you know, something like that. I mean, it's gotta be somebody pretty doggone important, who we know when we look back on it. And look who's up there. Look at the people who are up there. There's only a handful of people, like the McPhersons. I mean, nobody, I think, gave more to this town for, God, probably 40 years, I'd say, than Bob and Carol McPherson.
Wonderful people.
You know, and I would dare anybody to say differently.
Yep.
You know, those are the kind of people that need to have their recognition up there in the Great Hall.
And that's where the leadership hall comes in play. And it could be that as this board brought forward somebody, you might have 2 candidates that you think is worthy of it. So that is the part I think. I think on the Meritorious Service Award, they tend to be nominated not just by this board, but it's been nominated by
Another town board?
it's been done with.
The meritorious, the public nominates.
The public nominates that one. That wasn't controlled or handled by this board. You know, I could think of several that were worthy of this, and it came down to we looked at service to the town, and this is based on people who volunteer their time. You know, where the leadership hall takes in a whole different category. That's why we ended up with both. And, you know, I have to say, you know, this goes back to when Donnie sat with us when we started this, is that it became important to recognize the people that devoted a great amount of their own time to help move the town forward and make us progress forward. Where the meritorious service is somebody who, I don't know, I mean, you know, Deb just retired from the library. I mean, if you look at what people did, that's why we make this is open to everybody. This is what we put forward, and you could easily put 2 names forward if you were torn. And this happened, so.
Yeah, and
I agree.
And again, this is only introduction. I mean, I'm sure we're gonna have more questions. But, you know, and if you do, you know, forward them. And let's make sure that we do it so that we know exactly what we got.
But through the chair, I'm fine, Ralph. I had heard loose conversation about starting a committee for this.
No, I think we do it. It's our job.
The leadership.
It's our job, Tony.
If it stays with us, then I think I like the direction we're going in.
It's our job.
I just, if it went out into public, there had to be a way of controlling it.
Tough.
So,
Right.
I'm good.
Thank you. Me too.
And on the meritorious as well? Is
Now
that-
meritorious, I
keep
think
that
is a
the
different,
same?
yeah, keep it the same.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep,
So they're okay?
yep.
Thank you.
There is homework we did with the leadership, was I went to the town clerk, got their whole history, presented it
Yes.
to the members, and
Brought to us that night,
so.
So, Mr. Chairman, just procedurally then, will we, for next meeting, have an agenda item to vote
approve.
on these,
Yep.
vote to approve?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, next item, review and act on board liaisons assignment. I haven't really done anything on this, but if you have anything that you guys would want, can you just let me know what those are?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
I would like to take John Stevens' place as the school committee liaison. I'm the capital committee liaison already, and I served 15 years on the school committee and worked up there for a little under 7 years. I had two building committees I served on for 16 years, so I've had a lot of investment in the school district, and I'd like to be the liaison, if you can consider that.
I got it on my list. Anybody else got anything they want to pick so I can break this all down?
Parks and Recs, that was one of John's. I'd like to be the liaison to the Parks and Recs.
Let me find that.
Unless people want to ditch positions, all of John's have to be covered.
Right.
Listen, I'm the new guy, so you put me where you want.
To me, two very important committee assignments are economic development, and I'd like to get the financial management planning committee back together. The economic development committee is, we've kind of forced to meet on Saturdays, but, I mean, there's a lot of work to do there.
And
gonna
that's
be-
just really kicking hard right now. This is that's critical right now where we're going.
Yeah, and the financial management planning committee's gotta get back together and update the town's 5-year, 10-year plan.
Right. So, I know you'll stay there, right?
Yeah, those are my pet.
Those are your pet projects,
Yeah.
that's why I say, anybody have any interest in those?
Sure,
When?
sure, we'll do those with Tony.
That's critical to us right now for where we're going.
I guess I could just have people review this and see if we can,
EIS.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
dumping all of them, all the Johns to Wendy's really not fair.
Yeah, no, and there's some of mine that, with what, some stuff we're doing, I think is critical.
I never go down there.
Somebody has better background on where I'm going, so.
But yeah. I guess.
So any other changes, just let me know, and I'll try to shift this around and make it so that, because I don't wanna just dump all Johns on you, Wendy, I mean, there's some critical stuff that's going on that I think, really has to be watched, so.
Mr. Chair,
Sorry.
can we go back one step?
We can do whatever you want.
Back to leadership?
Yep.
Would it be possible, I don't know if this is how this board feels, but, I mean, we should get pictures of some of the town's forefathers in that hall, if this is what leadership is, like the Prouty and Bemis and
Richard Sugden.
Sugden, and we don't have to go through the entire historical plaque, but get their
It
pictures
might
in
be-
there.
It might be a good way to do a collage of something with who's who, that's not a bad idea.
I just, while with, it popped in my head that they have not been honored. And, yeah,
God bless you.
They used to take pictures. I know my
Remember
dad.
your dad when
Yeah, they used to
I'm
take
going back
pictures.
a ways.
Yeah. This
I'll,
was
I'll,
all three.
I'll send you my ideas, Brenda, on that.
I think the library has pictures of those people because I know I've seen them.
Yeah.
I don't know when, it could have been 50 years ago, but
Let's see if we can.
I
find
have
them,
seen
and we'll
pictures of
work
those
from there,
people.
and we'll
Yeah,
find
yeah.
a place to, I think that's a good idea,
And that could take up a town meeting too, so their names.
past, and not a bad idea. Okay. Do we have executive session tonight, Mr. Administrator?
We do have
Okay,
a
so
brief.
Ralph, you got it.
Yeah, I'll certainly make the motion. Just gotta find it. I move to meet an executive session in accordance with chapter 30A, section 21A, 2, to conduct strategy and preparation for contract negotiations with non-union personnel, the police chief, and not to reconvene an open session except to adjourn. we have to adjourn an open session, don't we?
No, you don't actually, you don't have to.
We don't have to do that
You can
anymore?
announce now that you're that the board will not
We're
be.
adjourning now, and then we just adjourn the executive session?
That's
You have
correct.
to sign this?
Okay.
Yep, that's correct.
new.
Next time.
Okay, we will not reconvene in open session.
Do I have a motion?
Nice job.
Do I have a second? This has to be a roll
Roll
call
call.
vote.
Right.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Roll call vote. Wendy?
Aye.
Ralph?
Aye.
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 And the chair votes aye. Thank you, everybody, and good night.